Welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. This week is the part 2 of our interview with Eddie. And I feel like a flight attendant sometimes when I say, go back to last week's episode and listen to our first part with Eddie. It was, a lot was discussed, but just in case you didn't, I'm going to give you the rundown. This is a flight attendant conversation.
Yeah, this is a little brutal, but
what, am I not supposed to do it?
No, just the way you set it up was like a little, cheesy, but
okay.
Continue.
All right, I'll get your feedback off air, and then we'll get a better way of doing this moving forward. So our the recap from part 1 is that Eddie is a solo doc, and he has a 3-op practice. And the one thing that Matt and I kind of both talked about last week was how impressed we were that he was very clear and sure of himself as a solo doc. And when you talked about his personality, he is definitely detail oriented. He is to the point. And I think on the spectrum of people emitting emotion while they communicate, he's definitely tame in that area. And so, on a lot of levels, he fits, and he's very disciplined, and he really enjoys clinical dentistry. And those are, for me, as I was listening, all of the qualities about Eddie that really helped me agree with his assessment of himself, that he is a good fit for the solo dentist model long-term. And so talking about his practice, he's got roughly 600 active patients. His practice size is kind of hovering around the 500 to 600K area. He's owned his practice for 3 years, and he's currently working Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And he wants to open the 4th day and add his hygienist on that 4th day. And so there was some discussion about that where Suzanne had sort of helped him see that that is a good move for him. And so his long-term goals are to have $1 million office. And so we talked about in part 1 was sort of like, what's the big picture path of getting there, which is essentially just adding the 4th hygiene day. And then Matt and I kind of debated he might need some more hygiene, and then also training his team on, keeping his recare a little bit more reactive and stuff like that you'll see in this episode. So I think that's enough of a recap. We talked about photography. He really likes that kind of comprehensive dentistry with photography and DSLR cameras and stuff in part 1. Matt, am I missing anything from part 1?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. So without further ado, Suzanne is going to kind of go with Eddie here and talk about the opportunities in his practice to grow. And she highlights some good points that Matt and I will elaborate on in the outro.
Well, welcome again to Practice Underwater. This is Suzanne, and I am so excited to be talking to Eddie again this week. We've got a lot of great things to talk about. I feel like we have a tall order. Everything that Eddie has asked for, we are definitely going to address today. How's it going, Eddie?
It's going well. Thanks for having me.
Good. Okay, so do you want to give just a little bit of a brief synopsis on your practice? Just kind of give us, operatories, all that good stuff, team members, all of that.
Sure. I have a small 3-operatory practice in a suburb outside a major city, wealthy area, 3 operatories, 3 employees, 1 hygienist. I work primarily out of 1 chair. Hygienist works out of 1 chair. We work 3 days a week, 8:30 to 5:30, Tuesday through Thursday. I'd like to add 1 day on either end of that of hygiene and general restorative dentistry. Pretty family-based bread and butter practice with a emphasis on comprehensive dentistry, implants, reconstructions, crown and bridge, minor ortho, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Eddie, I hope we're still going to be friends after this.
No,
after our conversation, okay? All right. So I'm going to challenge you to think about, again, part 1, we talked about why we didn't have 4 ops going forward. And I kind of wanted to get a sense of whether or not that was an investment. Like, are you holding off on investing? Is it dollar-wise? Is it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said it had everything to do with new patients, right?
That's how I feel. I don't pretend to know if that's the case, but if you suddenly give me some information that tells me otherwise, I'd be delighted. But I think that, yes, I need more patients.
Okay, so we said about 600 active patients. And,
right.
Basically, if we were seeing most of them, we have enough hygiene hours to support them. So here's kind of the area that I want to take you down is I said if most of them were scheduled. So dental intel tells us, and this is numbers, right? So no emotion tied to it. It's just plain facts.
It is what it is.
Yep, it is what it is, exactly. So 58% of the patients are actually scheduled ahead for their next hygiene appointment. So that's 382 out of 600.
Okay.
So first and foremost, we need to come up with a plan on how we're going to elevate that number and how we're going to grow and increase that ratio. Because what I'd like to see is going from 58% to about 80 or 85% of the patients scheduled ahead.
Okay.
Right? So tell me about where that happens, how that happens in the back. Is the hygienist appointing ahead?
Yes, typically the hygienist appoints ahead. We had been, I don't have numbers, but we had been doing a really good job. Actually, prior to COVID, I was very adamant about pre-appointing patients. So it was a little bit old school, but I was having the hygienist and the office manager, who was a different office manager at the time, but I was having them come to me with a scheduled list of the patients we had seen that day, and they could only check them off if they had their next appointment, which worked really well. And we were appointing people at a pretty good clip there. So that was working. COVID changed things a lot. People missed, 1 or 2 appointments. And so it's been challenging to reconfigure our hygiene schedule. Only in the past few months have we really gotten that back up to speed. There were days where the hygienist just wasn't even busy for a long time there. So, if you don't have patients in the chair, you can't really reappoint them. So I just want to get patients back into the chair, back where they need to be. If there's whatever it was, close to over 40% of people haven't been appointed, we need to find those people and get them appointed.
Okay, good. So to your point, and I think you convinced yourself about the value of the information that you had at your fingertips, whether that was manually or whether that was through, say, dental intel going forward. Let's talk proactive. So going forward, the hygienist is going to build value for that appointment in the future. So there's a discussion with the patient about what that next step is, why there's a next step. And not only are we scheduling them in the future, but we're scheduling them again with value, right? So the patient doesn't dream of changing that appointment. So you've got that proactive approach. And then in tandem here, we need to talk about reactivation, because you've got, 32% of the patient base that is overdue. My math right? Yeah. 42%.
42, yeah.
Yeah, of the patient base that is overdue. So someone needs to be contacting these patients and getting them back in. If they had a great experience the first time, then there should be no reason why they wouldn't be coming back, right? So you mentioned paying attention to this information, and that's your role, is as the leader of the practice, setting those clear expectations of, I want everybody scheduled ahead, and I want them, scheduled ahead so that patient knows why they're coming back 6 months and in 3 months. And that is ultimately, if we get that up to 80 to 85%, we're going to have our schedule filled in the future. And what I'm suggesting is we need some opportunity for these new patients that you're going to be welcoming. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. One comment I had is also, if I want to make this commitment to reading and interpreting the data about my own practice, I feel as though it's really important for the data to be accurate. And one of the things that I would also, in addition to reactivating those patients, is making sure that the patients who are inactive and are in our recall system are marked as such, so that we have an accurate readout of what's real. Maybe those 600 patients, maybe a lot of them aren't even real. Maybe they're never going to come back, which is, it is what it is. That's the reality of it. But what I need to know is that number real? Because if I don't, then it's hard to do anything actionable about it. So
I
just
hear
wanted
you.
to add that.
I hear you. I'm going to, again, kind of push the envelope a little bit here. You've seen 601 patients in the last 18 months. So we're not talking about the patients that were the seller's patients that you haven't seen in a while. 601 of those are patients that you've seen in the last 18 months.
Sure.
That clearly now, if they've decided, someone called them and they've decided they've moved away, yeah, absolutely. We have to make sure we trigger that, right?
Right.
In
Yeah,
your
that's all I meant.
practice management software. Yeah, absolutely. So let's even take a stab at this and say, okay, we've got, 50 of them that have left the practice
Yeah, we're
and are
still
not
like
going to
30%.
return.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yep, you're definitely on board there. Okay. So proactive approach, reactive approach, making sure that, someone's on the phone, whether that's the hygienist when she's got some time, whether that's your office manager. At some point very soon, we're going to need some help up front because, and, I'm kind of saying office manager. You've probably heard us talk on the podcast about what a true office manager is versus what someone sitting at the front desk or, a front desk lead, basically. And you have a small office, so I know you're calling her an office manager. I think she's more of a lead role in your practice. She's not necessarily, quote unquote, managing anything, right?
Sure.
But she is the lead person, the go-to person, in many different areas. This area in particular. And you also have her working on marketing and different avenues there. So in terms of, let's go back to marketing for a second, because we've talked about what are we going to do with the existing patients in the practice, right? If we don't have that system set up, then we can inject a bunch of new patients into the practice. But unless that system is set up for appointing ahead with value, and then if the patient falls out of the schedule for whatever reason, that we have a backup plan, right? That we've got a gatekeeper to make sure that primarily 80 to 85% of the patient base is scheduled ahead in the future.
Right.
So now we fast forward to a time where that's a strategy that is in place, that we're getting great success, and we're also welcoming new patients into the fold. So that strategy, when it comes to new patients appointed ahead, I have seen that we have about a little less than 40. Is that surprising to you? A little less than 40% of the new patients are actually appointed ahead in the future as well.
Meaning patients that come in.
They came in as a new patient.
And they didn't reappoint. Is that what you're?
No, we've got 40% of them that are appointed ahead. So flip side of that, we've got 60 that are not.
And that one, I believe you. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. When is in the 18 months, the past 18 months?
Yep, same time frame. So if we're looking at how many of those are appointed ahead, again, this goes back to how are we communicating that need for the next step?
Okay.
And if we
apparently.
Well, and this is something that you're going to go back to the team, have the team meeting about, and talk about what it means to communicate that to the patient, but also what the tracking part. I would say as the leader, you want to know this information.
Sure.
Okay? We don't want to know this after the fact where it's already too late to make any changes. Right? We want to, we want to be able to affect this going forward. So I would say, as you're looking at all of these different marketing avenues, this is the time to make some of those changes, because your marketing changes will start to attract maybe a different patient base, a different type of patient. And again, I'm going to challenge you guys to think about who exactly is the type of patient that you're looking for. Because if you're looking for the type of patient that's going to be able to afford the type of dentistry that you love doing, that you're recommending, then I think I'd open those horizons a little bit when it comes to who you're marketing to. And I love the college kids, don't get me wrong. They've got parents, basically.
Yeah, they're transient though. Yeah, they're
exactly.
not. They're
transient. And they're going to be great with your hygiene base.
Mm-hmm.
But then if they're transient, after some point in time, they will also be gone, and we'll have to make sure they're inactivated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to keep a lot of those other types of patients as well, the families that live in your area. So evaluate the SEO that's happening on the website. What are the results of that? I'd analyze that. And then when I look at your reviews, I know you've had quite a few in the last, couple of weeks, but still is not enough to really impact the area with reviews. So I would say I'd want you guys to be thinking about 5 reviews a week at the very least. What are you using? I mean, you've heard us talk about Swell. Are you guys doing
Don't use any?
like that?
We just get the patients to do it. we don't use anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So encouragement here. I mean, look into something like that. That takes a lot of the hands off of the team members who can get busy and either forget to ask or, ask, but are they getting any results basically? So I don't know, that may be another area you want to track is how many patients are being asked. And then what do we get as results? And something like Swell happens behind the scenes where it's not dependent on a person. It's happening on its own. And honestly, you're growing the reviews pretty quickly. So these are areas that you can impact. You can make a difference pretty quickly, and you'll see the results of that, I think, pretty clear.
Okay.
This episode is brought to you by Swell. So all of us who are already using Swell know that it crushes reputation management. It's like turning on a steady stream of reviews that requires no effort from your team and just works. It's amazing. Additionally, it makes it easy to stay in touch with all of your patients before and after their visits. And it even has a great way to set up a virtual waiting room. But there's more good news. Swell has a brand new version of their platform. And on top of being simpler than ever to use, you can now actually get patients to pay via mobile, which is incredible. The reason that Swell is so effective at getting reviews is they make it easy. They've now brought that same ease of use to paying for dental treatment even after patients have left the office. Mobile payments are a great way to text them a reminder so they can pay at their convenience right on their phone. You can pay via credit or debit card, ACH, or even Apple Pay or Google Pay with just a few taps. No more phone calls, no more chasing people down with emails and letters that always seem to get lost. And it gets better. This new release includes Swell Schedule, which is an easy way for patients to request an appointment time that works for them, so you can lock down those appointments quicker. Listen, Swell is one of those things that you just need to try it out, turn it on, see the results, and then you're converted and you're like, well, I'm never going to shut this off. Listeners of the Shared Practices podcast can try Swell for free for 30 days. No commitment. Just set it up, see the results for yourself before you pay anything. To take advantage of this offer, head to swellcx.com/sharedpractices. That's swellcx.com/sharedpractices.
Just as a question, what would be for a practice of my size in an area like mine, you probably looked at the other practices in the area, what would be like a goal and a time frame with Swell?
There's a practice in your area that has about 153. So I would say let's beat 153 for sure.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Now let's go back to the schedule for a moment, because we've talked about what you've got in terms of the active patient base. And if we were seeing everybody, we definitely would be able to have those 3 days filled. And I get the sense that you're kind of waiting for some sign that will occur that says, okay, now it's time to open. And so, my recommendation would be that if we are appointing ahead within the next 6 months, you'll see that 58% jump to 85%, which is our goal of what we're looking for. Tweaking some of your marketing to get in more new patients, increasing the reviews, and you guys talking about internal referrals and, asking patients to send others your way, I feel like are going to have an impact. We won't have the space. I don't see the need to wait to open that fourth day, because when a new patient will call, you'll have the opportunity to actually be seeing them. And as you then start targeting that and you have more of these larger cases, I feel like you're going to fill that schedule. Now, here's another number, honestly, is the amount of larger cases that were done was probably only about 26% of the revenue that you had in January. And January was your second highest month.
Yeah,
right?
I know. Yeah, we did really well.
You did awesome in January. But maybe you'd be surprised to find out that only 26% of the revenue came from the larger types of codes, the larger types of procedures.
Sure. Yeah. No, that sounds right to me.
Mm-hmm. So, that being the case, I think you have opportunities here to kind of grow the schedule as well and utilize your facility expansively, right?
Okay. Yeah.
What questions do you have for me?
I don't know if this is too narrow-minded, but what is the recommended, I guess I could do the math in my head, but you probably know it off the top of yours. What's the recommended amount of patients per hygiene day in a practice?
Per hygienist. So are you talking about 8 patients per day?
Yeah, 8 patients per day. So that would be
so how many patients can one hygienist service one day? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So that kind of rule of thumb is 200. So we tend to look at, that's why I said, if you've got 600 active patients, you've got 3. Now I'd like you to explore that 4th day where you have some availability. So let's just kind of play a numbers game here for a second. Okay. What are you paying your hygienist per day?
47 an hour. I don't know what it is per day.
Okay. So for easy math for myself, I'm going to use 50. Okay. Yep. So I'm going to say, taxes and everything. So I'm going to say $50 an hour. And she works 8 hours a day, right?
Yep.
So your pay for her is, with my math, 400. Okay.
Yep.
How many new patients do you have to see that day to actually break even?
Probably 2.
Okay. So the rest of the day, even if she were making phone calls, it was worth it, right? Because you had the availability to see hygiene patients, to bring in those new patients sooner rather than later, recognize that revenue. And even if she were helping with contacting existing patients that love her, I mean, her schedule is going to get filled for sure, but you've got at least someone as a backup. Now, for our listeners also, I never recommend that the hygienist be in charge of the schedule, because, and what I mean by that is like the reactivation part, okay? Because this goes in ebbs and flows, right? She gets busy and then, doesn't have time to make phone calls. Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of like ebbs and flows. And so what I would recommend is, for right now, if she's got some time, great, she can help. And as her schedule gets filled with the 4-day a week, plan, then you're going to need someone else up front to help with making those phone calls and helping your front office lead. Okay.
Another thing I would add is I've been, like you said, we're kind of servicing the right amount of patients. We're busy with the hygiene schedule. I actually would like to move into hygiene, sort of the ability to have my hygienist take a lot of photos, have a longer appointment with new patients to show them more of what we're all about, that sort of thing, which kind of coincides with the idea of getting that number of larger, more comprehensive treatment up from 26%. If we say we're going to do 4 days a week and then give her, 2 hours to see a patient, or an hour and a half, or whatever it may be, to really go through and do a thorough job and show patients what we're all about, that could have that could just be beneficial in terms of internal marketing. People could have better experiences. They might review us and say, oh, and I never had my teeth looking at so closely, that sort of thing.
This is full circle for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so I encourage you to set aside time for training, because it's likely that the hygienist isn't comfortable at this point in time without any training to do that. So it sounds like you're declaring this is, I want a comprehensive approach. Then let's put those action items in place that allow us to have this type of practice, if, that's where you're headed. Yeah. And schedule training from appointing ahead and making sure that that's a communication piece that is essential, and that's in line with your vision. And then the next step being, how do we, what does a new patient appointment look like from A to Z? What is your expectation there in terms of what they do, what the hygienist does? And then then the next step, you actually being the one that's delivering the treatment plan, how is that happening? Where is that happening? Allow you and your assistant some time and some, again, with your assistant, some clear expectations on what part is her part in that treatment plan presentation.
Yeah, that's great. I think that all integrates well.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other questions for me?
No, that's pretty great. I never, I didn't think I would come out saying, okay, now I need to talk to the hygienist about opening a 4th day right now. That's not where I thought this was going to go, but I'm seeing the light a little bit here.
Okay, good. I'm glad. And, just kind of on this last leg here of our discussion, this is phase 1, of this approach. When you're concentrating on the patient base and actually keeping what you've got and implementing this system, and then new patients being added into the fold, it sounds like you're set up to definitely keep that hygiene schedule open. And this is an easy $1 million practice. Oh, it's just a matter of absolutely, it's a matter of absolutely just putting the steps in place to get there.
Yeah, that would be great. That would make my life different. It would be a huge change for me.
Well, then at that point in time, you'll come back and you'll tell us, okay, this worked. I did it. We'll see you again on the podcast, and you'll tell our listeners exactly how it all went.
I'd be happy to do that. The least I could
do. Very good. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Eddie, for being our guest today.
Sure. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Welcome back, Matt. So a lot to discuss in this interview, but I wanted to kind of start with just some general takeaways that you had, about, I want to go back to mindset, actually. That's where I want to start, if you don't mind. We talked a little bit about it in part 1 outro, but I feel like it showed up more, the scarcity mindset that we had kind of talked about in the outro of part 1. It showed up more for me, at least in this interview.
Yeah, he pointed to a couple of times being kind of a skeptic of the numbers on dental intel and how they would be so accurate. I don't know. You can get nitpicky with these numbers tracking softwares, but I think it's really best if you just kind of blindly trust them. Like, are they 100% accurate? Probably not. But they're pretty accurate.
Yeah, how often is that, do you think? I think like a fourth or a third of guests will be skeptical of a metric on air. I feel like I've heard that enough now.
And you hear from people who don't currently use these, right? Like,
yes,
never actually seen them, so they feel a certain way. And this is the value of numbers tracking. Like, they feel a certain way about how things are going when they see a number that doesn't jive with that. Well, then it must be some disconnect with the program, and it's not on my practice.
So this reminds me of back when I first bought my practice. I had this hygienist that was there for like 20 plus years. And she's very kind of like this guy, very type A, like does everything she's supposed to do, like kind of very reliable. If you tell her to do something, she does it. She's very reliable. And she was like, oh, yeah. I'm like, okay, when the patient comes, we're going to make their next appointment. And she's like, yeah, I do that. 67% of the time.
Oof.
and now she's like the biggest metrics junkie. Like she loves metrics, and she's like, and I wish that I could record some of the things that she says and put them on air so everyone else can see like a hygienist feel this way about analytics.
Mm-hmm.
But she was like, I'm in the chair all day and I'm thinking I'm selling fluoride to everyone and I'm thinking that I'm reappointing everyone. But then I go look at my numbers and it turns out I'm not. And she's like, as the provider, you have such it's hard to tell how you're doing without the numbers. And she is just like the epitome of trying to prove the analytics software wrong. And she very rarely is right. Like it is accurate. It's hard to believe because you feel like it's going so much better. But that's the whole purpose of this is we're not feeling, we're measuring, we're being objective, and we're just going. And so I think it was really cool. And, for somebody to be in her like end of her career, but to really embrace this new thing, it's been really enjoyable. And so every time somebody's a data skeptic, I think of her and it comes up like once every 3 or 4 episodes. And it's like, that number isn't wrong. Or like, they don't know. Does not apply in my practice. And it's like, there's 8,000 offices plugged in here. Like
it applies everywhere. And the manager I inherited at the practice was like, oh, we tried having the hygienist book the next appointment in the back and it didn't work. Yeah. And then I looked back the other day at their pre-appointing before I bought it, 37%. So, actually what you were doing was not working and this 90%. So clearly.
Yeah. And that's the great part about, kind of our analytics-based approach is we use data to make decisions on how to do things. Like Matt just brought up a perfect example. Reappointing a patient in the back is statistically, objectively, the best way of doing it. So that's how we do it in offices. And when staff members put those complaints, we say, oh, heck yeah, quick fun fact. You can't get a reappointment rate higher than 75% if they all come to the front office. But in the back office, you can get mid-90s. Mm-hmm. And, we just give them those facts and then we proceed. We don't take their opinions. Opinions do not make decisions.
I've started using your words of like studies show this.
Yeah.
Like, show us that works really well. Patients and staff, like say those words before you say the thing.
Always.
That plays.
Because I always want to make sure that whenever we're doing a change and they give me my objection, I always refute their objection with data. I don't try to do it with my opinion versus their opinion, because then it's like I'm more important than them. It's like neither of us are important. The studies show, and then I'll say the thing. And like you could just say studies show, but like obviously I'm not reading like the Journal of Dental Practice Management doesn't exist. Right. These are just like our studies are like through different ways of measuring data with analytics, but like studies do show a lot of things. Yes. So I wanted to talk about that, but I wanted to elaborate on. So she brought up the pre-appointment percentage. And I want to highlight, there might be a little bit of this at the beginning of our switch to Dental Intel. We had talked about it with Rob, that we're moving from more reactive metrics to more proactive metrics. And this is a really good example of this. So I want to introduce some metrics to you that some you've probably already heard. So hygiene reappointment percentage, you've already heard. That is a number of times you are making a patient's next appointment when you're there. So if you see like 200 patients in a month, what percentage of those 200 patients in hygiene got their next hygiene appointment? That is your hygiene reappointment percentage. That's nothing new. The new one that you heard was your pre-appointment percentage. And so the PBN equivalent of that was recall current percentage. So recall current percentage would measure the number of patients in your patient base that have received a cleaning in the last 6 months. The number of patients that are active on recare is like in the past is the way it was measured on the old software. The new software, we measure the number of patients booked out moving forward, but it's the same number. It's assessing the total overall recare activity of your entire patient base as opposed to this month. Mm-hmm. And so the reason why Suzanne brought this up was because this guy, he's talking about his like scarcity mindset around adding the hygiene day, yet totally underutilizing his current patient base in filling hygiene openings based on the number of them that are booked out. So the proactive way of fixing this is by reappointing them when they come in. And then over a 6-month span, if you reappoint well, you should have a good overall future reappointment percentage, as opposed to having to wait 18 months for the cleanings to sort of catch up. And so this is something that I think she brought up because it ties back to the conversation about adding that 4th hygiene day. And so it really adds a lot of And that's the proactive approach. And then the reactively, yeah, he's got to go back and overdo recare phone call with these people. That's sort of reactive. But there's the proactive approach of preventing the issue. And then there's the reactive approach of fixing the issue now that it's there and kind of cleaning up always.
Yeah.
So
I like that you pointed to like fixing these systems before maybe a bigger marketing push or opening that other day of hygiene. That I thought that's a really key insight, that you want your house in order before you make the spend, because then you may not be capturing those patients like you should. She pointed to a bunch of his new patients who weren't pre-appointing for their next one. So all that's got to get cleaned up before he can really see his best ROI from that.
And then for him, he's already doing, we talked about in part one, he does a lot of photography, he does a lot of things, and his production per patient is already high. It could be way higher if he keeps them way more up to date on the recare. Mm-hmm. So he has a lot more opportunity than he might realize.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on this topic. Suzanne, so one of my favorite parts about hearing her in an interview. Last time she talked about like the marketing towards your ideal patient, something that Matt and I have never discussed.
No.
And this time she brought up another concept that like our coaching department discusses a lot, but Matt and I, we didn't do it back when we were coaching, was building value. She talks about this a lot. She's like, talks about the team building value. And this is more of like the team-based approach of our coaching department now, is building value. So she talked about getting the reappointment rate up, right? Mm-hmm. And our way of talking about that is, hey, hygienist, studies show, get the reappointment rate up. Mm-hmm. Like that's what we tell them. We say, get this metric up. But Suzanne, I think they go a step further where they say this metric needs to go up for these reasons, X, Y, and Z. And then they show them how to increase the metrics. And in this case, it's building value for that next appointment. And so Suzanne spends a lot of time, or the coaching department in general spends a lot of time when they talk to the team about building value to the patients or helping the team actually improve the numbers. And so when you work with the hygienist on like communicating with the patient the value of setting up their next visit, like, oh, you can get it at the day and time you like with the hygienist you want to see if you pre-book. Now we've built value for the reappointment, so then our metrics are going to go up. And so it's that concept of like, how do we actually create change in analytics? It's really by building value for the things that we're trying to push, like reappointment rate or pre-appointment rate, right? So like with the team, we need to build value so that they can see the reason why we need these metrics high, and then they can then build that value from a patient's perspective. And so that whole concept of building value is something we've never discussed, but I remember early on when I met Suzanne and we started working through our coaching department and forming it, I was like, wow, like you're really good at what you do. And there was times where I was like, you're kind of better. And this was one of them where she talked a lot about building value. And that's how she's able to get change in offices, is by helping the team see value and then helping the patient see value as well.
Yeah. I think this is like such a big opportunity for most offices out there, is changing up the verbiage and the way people present these things, even like how they make overdue recare calls and like what they actually say, how they handle a new patient call and what they say, and how they pre-appoint in hygiene, the words you use, and how you handle certain like common objections. Like when I'm in the office now, this is most of what I talk about with my staff. I overhear how they handle a certain situation, and then I train on them on the spot. So this is a great value of our coaching department, where they can now have these conversations directly with these staff members and talk about how to, because these are not inherent skills. Like we as dentists kind of understand them because we're, super invested and we think about this stuff, but a staff member probably isn't that way. So they need that training, and getting it from a former office manager is a great way to relate, versus us coaching a dentist and then the dentist trying to, instill.
And I think, we showed a good example early on of what that studies show, right? We're building value for the thing we're trying to say by talking about the studies that show the reasons why we're doing things. And so I think it's overall just like a really important concept that we probably don't touch on enough, but that's like a big part of our leadership and how we actually implement change, is by getting people bought in and on board, and building value is a great way of doing that.
All right, let's talk about his bootstrap approach for Google reviews.
Yeah, so this is where the scarcity mindset really came up for me. Was like, okay, so how much effort are we spending on these Google reviews right now? Like, oh my gosh, he talked about it so many times, and like the conversations with the patient is like, it's such an effort. And it's like for $150 a month to just be able to like hire Swell. Like seriously, maybe it's $199 a month. I think it's $199 a month, but like seriously, like what are you doing?
Yeah, and like he can still have these conversations if
they actually will go better if you have the conversations plus the text, the reminder. Like that to me, and it's like he's been doing this for 3 years and has 29 reviews, like that. So Matt, Yeah, he should have well over 100 by now.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I know he has a small patient pool, but to have that few views, and for someone who cares about him, that's like, it's one thing if you just don't even think about him, but he does think about him.
I'm going to paint the financial picture of why this is annoying to me, because I want to make sure that like I properly communicate exactly what this is. So he's had this for 3 years. So let's just hypothetically say he has been paying Swell. This is like the best Swell ad ever. I'm not trying to sell Swell right now. I'm just trying to make a point. So if he's paying Swell, he would have paid them $7,500 over the last 3 years. So that's $2,500 a year in Swell. And by now, Matt, how many reviews would you say he would have?
Conservatively, like maybe 15 or 20 a month. So
yeah,
a lot.
Like at least 200. I think 100 to 200, right? But let's just say 150. Let's be conservative. Sure. 150. The most in his area right now is 115. So Matt, what happens when you become the most reviewed practice in your area?
You're the first place people look when they go online to find a dentist.
And so let's say that around year 2, he passes him and he gets the other dentist. I don't know, maybe it's a woman, but like you pass the other dentist and you become the most reviewed practice in your area. Then your new patient flow goes up from like 10 to 15, like you're seeing right now, to like 20 to 25, probably. I would say conservatively, he would get at least 5, let's just say 5 new patients a month, right? With this guy's photography and his, and if you're reappointing them, the value of each of those patients is thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. And so you're getting thousands of dollars a month extra per patient because you pay $200 a month for Swell. Like, I mean, we're talking like at least $5,000 to $7,000 a month easily, very conservatively, in month 1 production off of a $200 a month expense. Like, and then he's opening up the 4th hygiene day. He's growing his practice to his vision. There's so many positive things that happen from that. And the thing that Swell needs is time, because it's by month and it's building. And I mean, that's why we include it in coaching, because we want that clock to tick as fast as possible. We want everyone on Swell as fast as possible. That's why we pay for it for all of our clients. We don't give them a choice, because we are unwilling to coach a practice that is not using Swell, because we are unwilling to grow a practice that is not gaining in the review game. That's the easiest money there is from new patients. Like I'm confused. Like I have a hard time with this one. Is there something I'm missing? Like,
I mean, I know
it's hard for such a straightforward, logical decision not be made.
Yeah, and he's a listener, so he knows about Swell and knows it exists and the benefits of it. It's the mindset piece. Like that's really
it's
really
the mindset behind paying for analytics and Swell. There's a reason we include them in every single one of our engagements with a client. Like, we feel they are not optional.
Yeah,
like they're not optional.
Yeah,
like I'm sorry, not knowing your metrics is not optional. And not doing the easiest marketing ever that's so cheap, and you're already talking to patients. Like, if you're bringing up the word Google review to a patient, like, you should be paying for Swell. Like, especially, like, your performance is going to be so much higher. I remember one of our pod leaders, Talon Davis, he implemented the both strategy when he first bought his practice of talking to patients and doing Swell, and the results he got were insane. And he had a solo office. I remember being blown away by the number of reviews he got. I forgot what it was, but I was like, wow, you killed me. Yeah. And like, I mean, my practice has over 500 reviews, and we're just kind of like a regular experience here. So, I mean, it's like really, I mean, there's a lot to be said about the power of that software over time. Not optional, not optional. It's a very big touch point of mine. But I wanted to kind of touch on the last piece here, which I love what Suzanne, her coming on, it really is emphasizing a lot of the things in our coaching department philosophies we teach our coaches that Matt and I don't discuss as much. And she talks about phases. And I really like that, because when she very much equates, when you're on a discovery call with her, you'll hear it, but she very much equates the process of growing a practice to a treatment plan. She's much more organized about it than Matt and I are. Matt and I are kind of like the dentists that sit with the patient, like, all right, next appointment is a crown. And then we're like, after the next appointment, we'll tell you the next appointment after that. We're kind of like, we'll kind of string you along. We don't really take the time to sit down with the client and give them the full treatment plan as how it looks in phases. And that's something that Suzanne, she's been a coach for a lot longer, and now our coaching department does, is they phase out their clients' treatment. And so here she's like, phase 1, right? Let's go through this treatment plan again. We've kind of gone over it, and let's go through it with the phase format, right? Phase 1 is add the 4th hygiene day, get Google reviews in place, and work on your proactive retention, right? And then phase 2 is some new patient stuff with marketing and some reactive retention. And then maybe you have to do something with a second hygienist and some staff, and then, but like you could break those up into more phases. But I like that she will always do that, where she'll sort of paint the phase picture for them. And it helps the client stay focused on the phase that they're currently in, while also still knowing phases moving forward. And I've always liked the way that she does that. I just feel like it's such a good fit for, especially the way dentists, because she's always been a non-dentist communicating with dentists. And so she's always had to relate to how they think. And I think the phases of treatment plan is something that they can get behind.
Yeah. And that's, it's important to know kind of the whole plan in general terms, and also know, okay, which comes first, which comes after, like the sequence of things matters.
The sequence is very important. I think it's very, very important, more than people might think.
Yeah. And we already touched on it a bit, saying, getting systems in the office, in good order before investing in marketing.
Like phase 1, systems in office in good order. Phase 2, investing in marketing.
Right. Yeah. And we got to speak in dentist terms, and she understands that. You and I kind of reject that talk. I made fun of your CPA talk. You wouldn't. What did he say about the endodontist? Like,
oh gosh,
wouldn't have.
Yeah, wait. Are we talking about the call that we have with the CPA where he used the endo analogy with me?
Yeah.
And I cut that off. I'm like, yeah, we're not doing dentist analogies with me, but like, that's got to stop.
Not to say she was that cringeworthy with him, which she wasn't. But,
no, it's very tasteful with her. It's like, she's not like going through the whole thing, but this guy, he sat me down and he was like, an endodontist, and he's explaining like a root canal to me. And I'm like, dude, like, he's like, when you needed a root canal, you go to the endodontist. I'm like, dude, stop talking right now. Just like, shut up. I couldn't do that one. And Matt's been with me on phone calls. I have very little patience for fluff, and this was like the fluffiest dental analogy I've ever received. And I'm like, dude, stop it this instant. But no, Suzanne's great. Like, she just mentioned the word phases, and like everyone knows what that means. Phasing a treatment plan. I loved it. I was a big fan.
That's great.
So So overall, I mean, I think this was a really great interview, and again, it was really refreshing to have a solo on here. So Matt, do you have any takeaways, kind of final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I'd love to see where this doc is in 6 to 12 months. And if he follows this phase plan, and if he's able to work through the mindset things, I think this could be, something that grows conservatively 10-15% this year. Or if he like really does shake things up, he does have that $1 million potential in the future. And, it's all kind of up to him,
Yeah. I mean, I think he could have his practice fit that he wants in a year. I think that would be pretty, I mean, I'm not going to use the word straightforward because that would upset people. This would be pretty doable. I'd say it's doable. I'm going to start using the word doable from now on because people don't like the word straightforward. This is doable.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. 100% doable for this guy.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, a great interview overall. I think it was really nice to have a solo doc on here. And so next week we'll see the next guest on Practice Underwater. Thanks for listening.